There are so many things to dig into there. One that I want to circle back on is a comment you made about programming being creative, right? VC is in tech, it's so full of hot takes and binaries, right? And one of those binaries, I think, for many years was, we saw this ascendance of STEM degrees, and it was basically like, if you're not doing a STEM degree, then you're probably you're making a terrible choice. And what's your future going to look like? You studied history, as you mentioned. I feel like we've kind of swung back now to thinking more about history, thinking more about the role of creativity in what we build.
There's a lot on that bone.
Yeah, well, whatever you want to chew off.
Yeah, where should I start? I mean, I won't claim that a history degree is superior for engineers or for startups. I don't know if that's true. Certainly not for engineers. You could say that I spent my entire career peeling back layers, like having started at web development, wanting to go closer to the metal, and I really kind of stopped at like Linux and infrastructure because that's where the market demands it. I became a founder around that time. So I'm not racking servers. I'll be forthcoming about that. But I've spent the last 10 years trying to learn the next layer beneath me. And I think that's not how everyone learns engineering. But for me, it really satisfied my curiosity because I'm kind of start with the layer of abstraction that allows me to do something cool, and then I want to do something a little bit cooler. And I'm like, well, the only way I can do that is I have to like learn this next layer. And then you start operating at both of those layers, and you now have more creative like flexibility or leverage, and you can build something more impressive, and then you run into a new barrier, and you have to peel back the next layer. I think that programming is really creative and expressive. I'm a very visual person, and I think in terms of like systems and abstractions and shapes and like object hierarchy, like abstract and instantiated classes, systems of rules. And that's, I think it's a very different way probably than thinking about algorithms and data structures.
Yeah.
In fact, like sometimes algorithms and data structures can be hard for me to grasp. But when we talk about system design or the design of a large code base, or what's axiomatic about a code base, like what makes this, why does this file live in this directory as opposed to this directory? What are the things that must be true about this file in order for it to live here instead of somewhere else? Those things come really intuitively to me, and it feels like kind of like molding with clay.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense that you describe it as creative. Then how does that show up in how you build your team, right? Who you hire. I've met Justin a couple times, who's fantastic. What's that relationship like for you all? Is he more, capable isn't the right word, but does he thrive more in more algorithmic tasks?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if I would say that like those aren't the dimensions that we are complementary on. And Justin is my former co-founder from first company, now founding engineer at Sazabi, best friend, roommate, collaborator at 4 different companies, I think.
Wow.
We go way back.
Yeah.
And he's an amazing complement to me. I really could not be building Sazabi without him. One of the ways that we're very complementary is that I tend to be extroverted and I tend to verbalize as I think. Justin is more introverted and more thoughtful, and reserved feels like it's doing a disservice. He's not a shy guy, but he will, he'll think about something before he shares what he, and he'll come to a conclusion before he shares it. I like to think through ideas by verbalizing them. So you often hear me like try on an idea by speaking it, and then I'll be like, I'll walk it back and say, actually, that's not quite what I meant. Which maybe is not well suited for podcasts. I'm not sure, but in that way, I think he and I collaborate super well, and we work well on problems. It's a nice counterbalance.
Does it manifest differently in this is kind of silly, but even in like PRs? Do you kind of fire off? I mean, I know
that's funny.
Agents have changed all of this, right? But does he? Some people have like really stringent standards around like commit messages, and they want to give all the context. And I mean, you're working at a small organization.
Yeah.
organization now compared to Brex. But yeah, do you see it manifest?
Like, am I firing off PRs and Justin's like, mine are like poorly tested
Yeah,
and Justin's are like complete.
That's not my implication, but maybe.
No, I don't think there's a correlation there.
Yeah, interesting.
But the way that we solve problems together as a team is that he will let me kind of generate ideas and basically spitball, and then he'll help reel me in, or I'll help prod or steel man some of the ideas that I come out with.
Yeah.
And it usually will help helps me come to a conclusion, and Justin will be sitting there like he knew the conclusion the whole time.
Perfect partnership.
Yeah, it's
right?
It's a great team.
Yeah, I mean, we need people who I think will let us explore, right? There is, I think, often this inner drive, right, to be heard or to go through that journey. So it's great that you have a partner who can help there.
Yeah, I mean, without the right thought partner, like, I think that my advantages aren't very advantageous. Like, it's not very useful to be just generative without the feedback. And so, like, you need both sides of the coin.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump to actually talking about Sazabi a little bit. Yeah. It's a really exciting time for you. You just started YC for the second time, which I'm thrilled about. In that, I can't wait to see I'm already seeing the momentum, right? Just seeing, the product continue to grow. Obviously, customers and revenue coming for that. But let's take a step back and talk about the promises of Sazabi. We could talk a little bit about the manifesto in terms of, like, there are a couple of core claims that drive it and that are a little controversial. So let's spend some time there. I mean, just the first, logs are all you need for folks who are listening who, don't know about the space. Frame that in terms of the space, and also talk about why it rubs some people the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, well, for now. I think.
Great. Yeah.
I think a lot of the core ideas behind Sazabi become less and less controversial the more that AI plays out, because they seem more self-evident. I mean, they seemed self-evident to me a year ago when I was writing about them, and now they're seeming increasingly like obvious, which is great. I mean, it's very validating. I'm glad we got started when we did. For context, Sazabi is the AI native observability platform for fast-moving engineering teams. It's effectively like Datadog, but rebuilt in 2026 instead of 2010.
Yeah, and walk us through what that. I have an innate sense. I mean, it's almost repulsion. Strong word, right? Like when you say that, I physically know what that means. But
there's a physical.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually much like credit to Datadog. I think for a long time, Datadog set the standard for product quality in the space. They kind of defined observability, or the observability era in the 2010s. Certainly defined the transition to cloud-based monitoring, and helped us through this microservices period, which I think we're mostly past now.
Yeah, I saw you tweeted about that today.
Yeah. Twitter I just have a lot of fun with, but I think Datadog is still a loved product, but we also really liked VS Code before Cursor came out. I remember thinking VS Code had everything I needed. So there's a better way, and there's been a technology paradigm shift, and I think there's an ongoing paradigm shift that in the way that we build software, and I think that the old way of finding and fixing issues in your production systems isn't just not going to continue to be the norm.
And walk people through that, right? I'm thinking metrics, dashboards. Describe some of, some of the pain, right, that you're responding to here.
The three big ideas behind Sazabi are less is more, logs are all you need, and traditional monitoring is dead. And those kind of point to, I think, the challenges that are associated with traditional monitoring, which I think all existed prior to AI and prior to Sazabi, but were exacerbated by AI. Less is more basically means that there should be less UI. Like if you open up Datadog today, you're looking at tens, maybe 100 modules. Obviously, all the items in the sidebar, all of the sub items in each of those menus, and then once within each one of those screens, like hundreds of configuration knobs and buttons. So it's a complete overwhelm in terms of functionality and user interface. But it also means less complexity less, I mean, this flows into our second hot take, which is logs are all you need, but like less instrumentation. This idea of logs are all you need basically refers to the fact that we, in contrast with the 3 pillars of observability idea, which has been dominant for a long time, we believe you only need to provide logs, not metrics or traces. We shouldn't, it's not to say that like instrumenting metrics and traces on your services can't be valuable, but just that it's unnecessary and superfluous. This is a very controversial idea because for a long time in observability, the 3 pillars, like if the first idea of observability is that observability is about asking new questions about your system, things that you didn't anticipate, then the second big idea is the 3 pillars. And everyone just cargo culted this idea. Observability vendors like Datadog have been, not to say Datadog or observability is a psyop, but they've certainly benefited from the idea that you should be instrumenting more and sending more data, and that you should have 3 modules or 3 sets of modules instead of just one. So you better believe that they like latched onto this idea and then it let it define their product roadmap and then sold it back to you. I think that logs satisfy all of the use cases that metrics and traces do. The original insight came from it was from my personal experience. We had, at many companies now, I've bought and configured Datadog and configured all of the modules, so all of it was available. But when something goes wrong, the first thing I always reach for is the log screen, and then I start doing log queries. And it just at some point occurred to me, like, I'm not using these other pages, and there's a huge amount of overhead associated with setting them up and maintaining them. And then that happened simultaneous with this realization that while logs used to be something that were disadvantaged because they were unstructured, you couldn't have a machine read them at scale, and then there was a constant push to make your logs structured. Like it was like at every organization I've ever worked at, it's like we've got an ongoing migration from unstructured logs to structured logs, and it's happening in perpetuity, and who knows like when this migration will be complete. AI is now able to read that data at scale in a way like that wasn't previously possible. And those logs are really rich. I mean, the information that's contained there, like the decision to, like the way that you write the error message, like whether it's like, this is a really bad error, or like, this seems suspicious. Like that has semantic meaning and value in it. And AI can actually use that. And then the last, I'm getting on a soapbox here with regards to logs are all you need. The last point I'll make here is that logs are essentially the same substrate as metrics and traces. A log is an event, and a metric is just an aggregated event. And a trace is a collection of start and end events. So if you have the logs, you can reconstruct the metrics and the traces. And now you've only asked your customer, the user, to instrument standard out and standard error, which is like way easier than StatsD or dog StatsD or Prometheus or Jaeger or like trace propagation. It's way less failure prone. It's like the Occam's razor of observability. So it's just a better product experience and user experience.
Hey, this is Ben Kesnoka, co-founder of Village Global. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Village Global podcast, where we go deep on all of the biggest topics in tech. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love to see you for the next one.